Let me give you some tips on chopping a mortise. This is one of those procedures that being done by hand can be so superior to being done with a power tool. Now, if you have a hollow chisel mortiser, which is essentially a machine that drills a square hole, they're fantastic and I use mine a lot. However, you're limited in how far in from the edge you can get. They have a very shallow depth of throat. If I'm having to chop a mortise in the middle of a 24-inch wide board, I can't use a hollow chisel mortiser, and the process of setting up a router to do it is more than I want to go through. I could chop that in minutes with a chisel. Let me give you a few tips. I'm going to do one on the edge of this board, so I'm putting together a frame. So the first thing we want to do is know the dimensions. Well, if you're going to chop a hole or a mortise in this, it's no good to leave 16th-inch walls. That's going to be your weak link. Nor do you want a little 1/8-inch mortise, because the tenon would only be very small, and that would be a weak link. So we'd go in thirds. So if this is 3/4 of an inch, then we want to chop a 1/4-inch mortise. We use a 1/4-inch mortise chisel. So I'm just going to throw some lines on here, and this is this will be the outside edges of the mortise. Now, what I would do with my mortise gauge is adjust it to the width of the mortise chisel. Set that in there. Just tighten that second cutter up until it squeezes the mortise chisel between the two. Then tighten this brass knob, and now that dimension is the exact width of the mortise chisel. So we would come over here and we want to center this. So I'm going to eyeball it first and try to get it close, and then push it down. Now I've seen my marks, so I'm going to flip it over and see if they line up. And they don't quite, so I got to come over just a little bit more. Not much. Try it again, a different spot. That looks good. Now you can come in there and use that to leave yourself a mark. Now what I don't like about this is the fact that the bevel is on the keeper side. So I actually prefer to use one line, and this is where I would use my marking gauge. I'm going to set it down in that groove on the far side. That way I'm keeping my nice square edge on the outside piece, or in this case the cheek. So there's my line. Now I find it helps if you go in here and just draw some perpendicular pencil marks off of that, and this will help you orient your chisel in the chopping process. Now you want that on something nice and solid, and this is a soft wood, so I can probably do this in the vise, but it would actually be better off if it was up on the bench, squeezed between the two bench dogs. Now I want to stay away from this outside line and this outside line until I'm almost finished. So I'd start here at about the 1/8-inch mark, and instead of trying to guide my chisel between two lines, which I find very difficult to do, I'm going to stay tight to that line on my right, and I'm using this line to line up the chisel edge so that I know I'm not twisted one way or the other. I'm also looking at it this way so that I can see plumb, because if you're doing this entirely by hand, you have to make that hole go in so that the side wall is going to be perpendicular to the face. So when your tenon slides down there, it's not off on an angle. And what you would do is chop, and then you're going to step back a little bit. Depending on the wood will determine how much you can take each time. Try to go a little bit deeper each time. And what happens is the bevel of the chisel will ride, and it'll push the fibers toward you. And in doing that, they easily sever. Now when you push this, don't hold on like this. I do it just like I would operate the bolt on a rifle, and just push like that, and that means that side walls will guide the chisel. You're not pushing it one side or the other and scraping, and it'll just break up these fibers, and then you just keep going each time, trying to get a little bit deeper. Now what I neglected to mention was the depth. What I normally would do is take a Sharpie, measure off of my opposite piece how far down I want, and put a line across there, and usually going to be a little bit deeper because I don't like going in and trying to clean out the bottom of that mortise. It's difficult. It's of no value from a gluing perspective, so I'm going to go a little bit deeper than what I need. And you can tell at what point you can pound a little bit harder. I'm about 3/16 of an inch away from that line. And this is aspen, so it's really soft. Nice wood to practice on. And the fibers come up in little chunks. It's really cool the way they break off. But it's very easy to do. This is not a difficult procedure. Holding it plumb is a bit tough. Now once I got to this end, actually I go a little bit farther, but I don't want to go right to that line until my very last step. That way I'm free to pry this way and not worry about going beyond where my shoulder is going to protect or cover. Turn that around, and now we got to come back, just break some of those fibers out. I'm down to depth. Just watching my gauge line. It's on the face of my chisel, which you can't see, but now when I finally get close to that line, what I would do is now stand this way because I want to see plumb in this direction. The hole or the mortise will guide my chisel. Now I've turned it the other way so that the bevel is now facing out. And I'll just start chopping down, watching my line back here. Push that over slightly just to break those fibers free at the bottom. And then I would just eventually work my way to that back line, wanting to make sure that the outside edges are nice and plumb. And don't worry too much about what it looks like in there. The whole idea is to try to keep that chisel from twisting. If it twists, then you're going to end up making this opening a little wider than you want. As long as you keep that chisel so that the sides are parallel to the line, then that mortise is going to be the exact width of the mortise chisel, and you'll take that reference when you cut your tenon, and it'll be the exact width, and you may get lucky enough that it'll fit the first time. Good luck.